blood, sweat and cum, fighting, sex. It's all at UFC 4.
Is that a real thing?
No.
Hey, listen, fuckhead. You know, you can do whatever you want to do. You can put me on mute. You can turn the goddamn channel for all I care. What the fuck are you doing? And you're listening to us now. So obviously you didn't hit the fucking mute switch tonight, asshole.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the Royal Grumble. I am your host, Graeme, and sitting in the corner to my left, he is an actual master of jiu-jitsu. It is Dan. How are we doing, Dan?
All right, white belt for life.
White belt for life. And sitting to my right, like a true MMA fighter, is used to having a man pounding him on top. It's Daryl. Hi, Daryl.
I don't want to do this show anymore.
It normally finishes when the guy gets behind.
Oh, he's done you there
It's just filth, isn't it?
2-on-1. Not in that way.
I like it in that way.
Well, we know. How are you doing?
We're doing all right until I got a barrage of insults. I got double teamed by my two friends. Again. What do you like?
I thought we agreed we weren't going to talk about that on air. Now I'm wondering whether or not to bother talking about Raw now, because obviously this week, just to clarify, the whole reason of my little intro, this week we're talking about wrestling and MMA connection, because Brock Lesnar is fighting at UFC 200.
I mean, by the time they hear this...
you almost think I was the host, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. Sorry.
By the time you hear this, you'll know that he's beaten Mark Hunt in 4 seconds, and they're definitely not happening. But you'll know whether or not Brock Lesnar has won his return to MMA at UFC 200. But in the meantime, we thought we would take this, and this is going to be the first part of a two-part concept, the second part of which will become very clear at probably around UFC 203. So you can probably figure out what we're doing with that one.
Unless he gets back surgery, and then it might be like 2010. No, 210. There's not a 2010, is there?
I thought he was fighting at 202.
What? No, 203, isn't it?
It's 203.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Come on, MMA fan. You're wearing a blooming Hendo MMA t-shirt. You've got a white belt. You not keep up with it? Shocking. Anyway, whole point is the show this week, our main topic is going to be the connection between wrestling and MMA, and this week we're going to be looking at MMA fighters or famous participants in MMA who have come into professional wrestling, and we're going to talk about the little mix that comes between pro wrestling and MMA. That is entirely preferable to talking about Raw, which, Daryl, you watched Raw.
Yeah, and what date was it when Raw aired?
Oh, I don't know. They never mentioned it on the telly.
What date was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it might have been July the 4th.
Are you sure it was definitely the 4th of July?
I think maybe, yeah.
Definitely.
In
fact, do you know what it was? It was because it's Independence Day in America, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah. I think they mentioned it once, and that's how I remember. Right, so Lillian Garcia. Well, there's a food fight at the start. Fuck that shit.
Right. No, I want to talk about the food fight at the start.
Okay.
Because the food fight at the start, because I was watching Raw this week, and the food fight at the start literally told me, don't have to watch this week, off it goes. And that's from someone who watches it every week.
There were a few good moments in that food fight.
Yeah, but where the...
Yeah, right. So all the gingers sat on the same table.
Only you would notice that.
Well, yeah. All the gingers sat on the same table. Because they're ostracised, obviously. Then Jericho was eating something, and he picked like a plaster out of his food. And then that's when he got into the food fight, because he threw it at someone. I thought it was pretty funny. And Kevin Owens got under the table and hid from everybody, which was good, until he got out, and then the camera cut to a first-person shot of him getting pied in the face, which was really, really weird.
Yeah, because who's pieing him in the face?
Yeah, but how did the camera cut to a point-of-view shot of Kevin Owens?
Yeah, that's
he's got a camera
worse.
in his head. It's part of WWE contracts. Yeah, they install cameras in your head, like on Peep Show.
And then, it was never revealed who pied him in the face either.
No, so at least pay it off.
But Maurice looked fucking fine. Like, not that she don't normally, but like, oh, Miz is such a lucky bastard.
Have you got a fetish for when people are covered in food? Because that is a thing.
No, like it's
forgot the
before
name
she
of it
got
now.
covered in food. Like if you've not seen this segment, you just need to watch it before she gets like covered in food. He's googling food fetish. He's not looking.
I'm
for
trying to find the name of your
really?
strange
Yeah.
fetish. Oh well.
my god.
Sploshing. That's the one. That was a bit loud.
That sounded like the most. That was your Alan Partridge moment so far. Sploshing.
Daryl's into sploshing.
Sploshing on UK food.
Anyway, so pre food, she looked fucking fine. Like you want to search this out because it's top quality material. Anyway.
You're getting a bit disturbing now,
So
mate.
Lillian Garcia, I'm not reviewing the whole show, don't get worried, but Lillian Garcia sings the national anthem. And if I see another American cry at Land of the Free, Home of the Brave, I'm going to fucking kick him in bollocks. It's your fucking national anthem. Just get over it. I don't cry when I sing God Save the Queen.
I guess
And I've sang that to you before, Graeme.
Yes, you have.
At a wrestling show, Lillian Garcia sang it.
I know.
Do you remember?
I do remember. I was there. I guess we're beyond last week's sort of US patriotism with the old US Championship DVD, and now we're just flat out back to hating America, are we?
Yeah, well, no, I don't hate America. We went, and then you've been, haven't you? But
Yep.
like, I enjoyed America when I went.
I
Like,
went to proper deep South America as well.
Did you enjoy it?
I went to America.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. You went to Texas.
Yeah, that's America.
That's not deep south. I've been to North
They
Carolina,
want to secede.
mate. In fact, I've been to South Carolina.
Oh yeah, that's proper hit country.
Yeah, exactly. Try
you got
that
family
one.
there, right?
But that's not their fault. Hi, everyone. Love you very much.
Do they listen?
I hope not for their sake.
Do they like wrestling?
No,
No, they're not going to listen then, are they?
I really hope not for their sake.
But yeah, so like, I don't mind America, but I just don't like patriotism. I really hate it. Like, what?
You don't like patriotism?
No.
Okay, carry on.
Well, I don't.
I am going to mug you off, so just carry on, and then I'll mug you off afterwards.
Just do it now, because I think I know what you're going to
What
say
have you got
anyway.
on your leg?
I've got a Ukrainian
Right
flag
leg.
tattoo, but it's not. It's not to do with
Bloody hate.
patriotism. It's to do with my family heritage, which is different.
But if it was your family heritage, why didn't you have your family's name on it?
Because I didn't want my family's name on it.
All right, just your country.
Well, the
Which you would
country
die
the country that my granddad was born in.
Yeah.
And then he had to flee because it was war torn, and he came over as an immigrant.
Don't you feel a dick, right?
Yeah, don't you feel a dick? And
Well,
then I don't know any side of that
Actually, no.
family. Are we keeping all this in?
He's from Scotland. He knows all about war torn.
I think you find on the news that all immigrants are going home.
Are they?
That's definitely what's happening. So I mean, I don't know, but someone on Facebook said that's what's happening, so it must be true.
So shall I leave now?
I read it on Twitter. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I mean, if it's on Twitter,
shall I fuck off back to my own country?
yeah, if it's on Twitter, it's real. So there you go. Get Brexited.
Yeah.
There's just going to be me left.
Yeah.
When Scotland goes back to EU.
Yeah, when we secede and he fucks off back to where he's.
We can
got
still do
from.
this via Skype, though, can't
Yeah.
we?
This shit.
I assume Ukraine's got Skype.
Yeah, but you'll have to pay like EU tax on Skype.
Oh fuck.
Funnily enough, just talking about Ukraine, segueing into their natural enemies, the Russians.
Oh yeah.
Daniel's favourite.
Bulgarians, you mean?
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
I
but he
suppose
comes out with
it is.
smoking hot Russian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she's American, but she's
Yeah.
Russian.
Yeah, she's Russian, isn't she?
I'd ravish her.
I'll be sure to pass that on, yes. So, yeah, sticking in Eastern Europe, you're all right, because, of course, I forgot he's no longer Russian. At some point, they clearly decided maybe we should actually bill him as where he's from, so he's Bulgarian. Your favourite Bulgarian brew, I thought you would have watched some of Raw, because I thought you would have...
I didn't watch, but I listened to the review of it on Wrestle Observer, and they mentioned Rusev's post-match promo, which will probably be featured in this podcast in the bit in between.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
They'll edit it bloody in again. I did notice that this week they didn't go as far as to have Rusev actually interrupt the national anthem. Did they, Finley? I'm calling you out.
I
Finn.
sent this to you yesterday, the
Yeah, you
Twitter
did.
thing, where he was talking about, what was the thing again?
Basically, somebody on, I can't remember who it was.
It was the
Somebody-
Fighting Spirit editor.
Oh, there you go. That's right. Yeah, it was the editor. He follows me on Twitter, actually. Hi, Brian. The Fighting Spirit editor said WWE are really not looking forward to having Raw on Independence Day because basically nobody watches telly on Independence
Yeah.
Day. They all go out and I guess they must have just got and
They'll go out and
party
chant,
barbecues
chant
and-
USA.
Fireworks and shit.
in the street
Yeah, wear American flag hats.
for 4 hours. And then Finley had a go at him, didn't he?
Yeah.
Now Finley is still a road agent, isn't he?
Yeah, again,
Yeah.
he's a road agent again now.
Yeah.
'cause
After he got sacked for that. For what again? Just remind us specifically.
On a house show he was booking, he sent The Miz out during the national anthem to get heat.
Except there was some kind of military commander in the front
The
row.
National Guard,
Yeah,
but
there you
they had a
go.
lot of National Guard people in the front row, yeah. They weren't happy.
No.
And I like Fit too, but come on, that's a wrong thing to get on your pedestal for, mate.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, really. Of all the people, I think I'd have just stayed quiet, buddy.
Yeah, so it's very American centric on this show. Wrestler fashions, regular feature.
Wrestler fashions.
So Titus O'Neil is just dressed as Uncle Sam. He's just got like, do you know when Consequences Creed were in TNA?
Yes.
Um,
Well, basically, he's dressed as Apollo Creed, isn't he?
yeah.
When he fights Ivan Drago, we all know what
he
happens
had all that gear on.
Ivan Drago takes steroids.
The main event match, allegedly, the main event match was an all-American team versus, I think it was called the Multinational Alliance.
Basically, the foreigners, wasn't it?
We should call it League of Nations. No, we can't call it League of Nations. Why? We had that faction. Did we? That's how that conversation went.
I'm sure weren't like 4 of the people on the other team American as well? There was something like that. I'm sure I remember reading through and going, there's something weird about that.
What do you mean?
Well, there was like, I can't remember off the top of my head. It was like Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Sheamus,
Jericho,
Lucha
Lucha Dragons.
4. And then, but like Kalisto, isn't he from like San Diego or something?
Probably.
Yeah, they're probably billing from Mexico, don't they?
They do, but nonetheless, it was still like, it's the same
But
way
the
that...
bill came from Parts Unknown, and he was Team America.
Exactly. Kane. Wasn't Kane from Spain?
Yeah, he was born in Spain, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't that... Where did that come from? Was Glenn Jacobs actually born in Spain?
I don't know. I just read it on Wikipedia.
Because
once.
I've read it as well. I've read that Kane's from Spain. And I really hope it was just a rhyme that got our hand.
Yeah, so that was that bullshit. Now, the only notable thing on the show, well, 2 notable things. One of them was the club segment. Are we both aware of this? Have we seen /read?
Yeah, I'm aware of this, yeah.
So Cena comes out. He's a bit patriotic, but he's not as bad as everybody else at this point.
He does it better, though, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. But I think he also went out to sort of rally the crowd a bit because they were a bit dead, and he pretty much went, "Are you Marty fuckers going to cheer tonight or what?" Because, like, you know, I'm here, I'm back, cheer. And then AJ Styles came out with Anderson and Gallows and cut a fucking mean promo on him. I was fucking well a fan of this because they had some old MLW podcast references on there. So Carl Anderson talks about his hot Asian wife.
I was going to ask because apparently Talking Shop is coming back.
Is it?
Yeah, on Jericho's like the one hosting it now.
Oh, right. Because I know that Jericho's got his own podcast network now.
Yeah, it's going to be on there.
Oh, because he's nicked Conan from MLW. Conan's not doing MLW now. He's going to Jericho's podcasting and doing his own show on there.
Talking Shop is going to be on like Jericho's network.
Excellent.
Podcast 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or is Jericho
I think
branching out?
I
It's
think
Podcast
it's still
One
under
hosted.
Podcast 1, but it's called the Jericho Network, and Jericho's. No, you say but he's. No, he's got good.
Daryl's
Daryl's going to present it, like, defend it as well because they're doing Talking Shop.
I know he's got a lot better. I do get that, but
And
on some level,
that
it's just a
interview
little
with
annoying, isn't it?
Nancy Benoit's sister were fucking mint.
Yeah, well, I mean, you tweeted about it.
Yeah,
I mean, it definitely bears repeating that is absolutely worth it. Like, I know I make my joke, we don't listen to any other podcasts. If you do nothing else, definitely listen to that because it's very insightful into something that I think is genuinely intriguing to people.
Yeah.
Because you sort of wonder about the psyche, don't you?
Yeah.
But I won't go
she's
into
obviously
it.
like closest to the situation that still living.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In terms of news and stuff, the only other thing I wanted to talk about was obviously on SmackDown.
Sorry, can I just say they paired Enzo and Kaz with Cena, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, sorry, I did.
So the club came and did the beatdown on Cena, and which I thought was really good because quite often what happens is they do a heel will do a beatdown, but the face will still get the upper hand, and they just beat him down, and then Enzo and Kaz came out to make the save, which I thought was good. And then eventually Cena and Enzo and Kaz overcame him, and that's I think it's gonna set up a 6-man for Battleground.
Did they not already confirm it?
Maybe they did. I don't know because
it's definitely anyway. It looks like that's where they're heading, which is good because I understand why. Enzo and Kaz are a lot more over than any of the other tag teams, and in terms of pairing them with Cena, they're probably the best selection.
Yeah,
I mean, they seem to be building to a sort of an Usos and club thing a little while ago, and that just wouldn't have gone down that well now, would it? I guess it was more to do with the whole Roman Reigns thing.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Could you imagine if they'd had the Usos and John Cena? He'd be like, "What the fuck are you two doing here? I will do this by myself. Go home."
Yep.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to mention before we move on to our main segment of the show, and I did. They announced Brock Lesnar's opponent for.
Yes, this was the second notable thing that I was going to say that happened. But so listeners, we're not recording this. Like Graeme thinks, like Graeme's suggesting, we're recording this before they announced Brock Lesnar's opponent. So on Raw, they said they're going to announce it on SmackDown. We've not seen SmackDown because
you just have to pull back the curtain, don't you?
Yeah, I am, because we'll look like knobs, and I'm not a knob.
well.
So who do we think? Well, we'll have two, but Dan, you're not allowed to elaborate, right? So you want a think and then a dream opponent. So somebody who you really want him to wrestle, that's on the roster. Let's not be silly and say someone that's not in company. And then who you actually think they'll pick.
The dream one would probably be Rusev, because that'd be cool. Even though it'd probably be Lesnar winning. The one I think is Randy Orton's the bigger rumour.
Okay, Graeme.
I think Bray Wyatt, but I would prefer AJ Styles.
Okay.
Not lightly, but it would be cool.
I would like Kevin Owens, but like Dan, I think Randy Orton, just because I've heard rumours that it will be Randy Orton. I've also heard it might be Shane McMahon as well, which,
if nothing else, would be brilliant.
Yeah,
can you imagine Shane trying to do his? Can you imagine Shane trying to do his little, I'm a fighter, I'll do rabbit punches. Brock will smack him in the balls. He'll kick him in the cock.
It'd be like what he did to Braun Strowman. But Braun Strowman's huge. Imagine if he threw that fucking clothesline at Shane McMahon.
He'd kill him.
He'd break him into about 7 pieces.
Snap his little twig head. Speaking of Brock Lesnar snapping people's little twig head, we're going to discuss the connection between professional wrestling and mixed martial arts after this.
USA! 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 Go ahead! Celebrate with your hamburgers and little weenies! Celebrate for Rusev! Happy birthday, America!
Fighting. It's in our DNA. It's the oldest sport going. But do you know what's nearly the oldest sport going? I'm asking you.
What? No, what?
Professional wrestling.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Professional wrestling originally originated from shoot fighting. So it's natural there'd be a bit of a crossover.
Oh, yeah.
And between the two, and as early as 1976, Vince McMahon Sr., the then Worldwide Wrestling Federation, promoted boxer versus wrestler Inoki versus Ali. Ali died recently. It was very poignant, obviously, and a lot of people in professional wrestling brought up the fact that Muhammad Ali had this crossover fight against Antonio Inoki. A very famous fight, famous for the fact that supposedly, and I don't know how much of this is true, wrestling world being as it was supposed to be a work bout until Ali turned up in Japan, went, nah, I'm going to pagger him, everything's going to be fine. So Inoki went, right, we'll see how that goes, mate. Dan, you know a lot more about this than the other two of us. Yeah,
I'm currently reading the Inoki vs. Ali book. I wanted to get further into it before we recorded this, but on what you just said about Ali showing up, it was supposed to be that Inoki would beat Ali and then they'd do a return match in America. But Ali showed up and he said, I'm not going to let any man pin me. If someone's going to beat me, he's got to beat me. So then they came up with a bunch of rules that pretty much handcuffed Inoki and led to the fight. Did you two watch the actual fight?
I've seen it before.
I also have seen it before.
Yeah, it's garbage, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very very shin kicky.
Yeah, but it was at the time when no one really knew about leg kicks outside of Japan. Like kickboxing hadn't reached America, so Ali doesn't ever think to go, you know what, I should move my leg out of the way of all this stuff, and ends up getting his legs absolutely battered, and they have to call it a draw to save some face. Yeah. It's just it's.
But why does he stay on his feet? That's what I don't understand. Why didn't he just get on top? Yeah,
Ali?
Just get on top of him and punch him.
because he had no idea about grappling, and the rules stated that I think you were only allowed 3 seconds of grappling before the referee would stand it up.
Right, so he won't get submitted in 3 seconds. So get down, punch, the referee will stand it up. Get down, punch, referee will stand it up.
But the thing is, he couldn't actually get near him because Inoki was like guarding with his legs.
I think he's a bit of a pussy, to be honest.
Inoki did the old flip tortoise defense, didn't he?
Is that the technical term?
Definitely.
He wasn't allowed to strike because he wasn't wearing gloves.
Yeah.
If he grappled on the feet, Ali, all he had to do was grab the rope and the referee had to break it. If he took him down, he was allowed 3 seconds and that was it, and they'd stand it back up again. So he just thought, well, this is what I can do. I can continually kick him in the leg from the ground and Ali won't have a clue what to do with me. So that's how he did it, and it ended up going to a draw, but Inoki actually won that fight. If you go by like modern scoring, Inoki won.
I'm led to believe, didn't this cause massive problems for Ali later on in his career as well?
Yeah, it's a big train of thought that because he slowed in his fights after that, he was a lot slower. And I know that like the issues with Parkinson's started coming in. The fight after this, I think, is the one where he did the medical test and it came out that he couldn't actually put his finger to his nose in the medical and they still passed him. Yeah, that's fucked up, isn't it?
Oh my God.
Boxing. But yeah, like this fight is believed by some to have caused some of the problems later on in Ali's career with his speed disappearing. He couldn't do the rope-a-dope as much anymore, and yeah, it's had a big effect on Ali.
Well, he got his legs kicked to fuck, didn't he?
Yeah, they were really they fucked up by the end of that fight because he honestly didn't know. No one knew about like leg kicks and stuff. He just thought, what's this guy going to do? Kick him in the shin? He's going to hurt his foot before he hurts my leg. Ali was wrong.
Well, nonetheless, this is served as something of a precursor to the modern day mixed martial arts in that it was the first widely promoted mixed martial arts fight in having a boxer against a wrestler. And Inoki sort of always had a fascination with MMA, really, within pro wrestling. Especially when he was running his company, you would see a lot of MMA fighters come in, and he had something of a fascination as well with throwing professional wrestlers into MMA fights with varying success. Now,
well, the whole thing with it is Inoki believed that pro wrestling was a martial art. Because, well, it was during the time when they'd actually trained catch wrestling. Like you had people like Billy Robinson and like Gene LaBelle was involved in it as well. You get these people who were trained in legitimate submission fighting who would come in and do pro wrestling and train the Japanese guys. So Inoki would say in martial arts forms, like we do a bit of everything. Like pro wrestling is the best martial art because we could take on any sort of individual martial art and defeat them in an actual fight.
No.
He's probably wrong on that in some cases.
No, he is fucking wrong. I'll tell you why. Because if he walked up to a fighter, say Anderson Silva, out of plucking one out of my head.
Oh, just plucking one out of your head.
Plucking one out, and he went, right, we're going to have a fight. And Anderson Silva's like, yes, okay. And that's how he talks. And then, like, Big John McCarthy's like, are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on. And then he goes to do a collar and elbow tie-up. And Anderson Silva's like, no, I'm just going to kick you in the fucking face. Like, what does he mean? It's not a martial art.
The catch
wrestling is a martial art.
The collar and elbow tie-up's a wrestling move. It's also kind of a Muay Thai thing, like when you get to the plug.
But he says, we're going to do one because pro wrestling's a work, you fucking mark. What does it mean?
In Japan, like from the Ali Inoki fight,
he's a Hall of Famer.
Because of that fight, Inoki became like almost to levels like Ricky Dozan. He was a huge, huge star in Japan. And it led to all this stuff about pro wrestling being a martial art. Because even at the time of Pride, and we'll talk a bit later on about pancration, like pancrase in Japan, that was considered like pro wrestling. Pride was considered more towards pro wrestling than it was martial art. Because everyone believed in this Inoki pro wrestling as a martial art form. And that's what leads to the legitimacy of like New Japan and companies like that. Because in Japan, it's part of martial arts culture, pro wrestling. And that's why we get a lot of the MMA fighters who come into New Japan and All Japan, Inoki Genome Federation. And they have kind of like worked MMA fights. And they work on a pro wrestling card over there because there is that crossover.
Pride is also considered pro wrestling because a lot of it was fixed.
According to Chael Sonnen.
Yeah.
The referee wears earpieces.
Chael piece on him.
There were actually pro wrestling matches in Pride, weren't they? To my understanding, there were.
They had some worked matches early on.
Yeah.
Like I think it was like
once you start, you can't go back. Though, can you?
Mark Coleman had one early on. I seem to remember, But they did have a few work fights early on, but later on Pride did become, well, as legitimate as we can believe with the mic'd up referees and all that stuff.
I think the tricky thing with that is it's like the whole thing of why WWE could never successfully promote a mixed martial art league. Once you peel back the curtain, once you go, a lot of this is predetermined, you're always going to have people saying, well, that's fake, that's set up, that's not real.
Well, that was one of the problems with Ali Inoki. The reason it didn't do very well in America is because boxing fans thought this is going to be a shitty worked pro wrestling match, whereas wrestling fans were kind of like, well, I don't really want to see a half-assed boxing match. And it was only like the proper hardcores who actually went and bought it, and people who were like actually intrigued. So it didn't do as well on close, because they thought it was going to be bigger than like the Rumble in the Jungle and the Thriller in Manila. That's how big they advertised it.
Do you think if the wrestler in question was somebody like Hulk Hogan rather than somebody that nobody had heard of in America, it would have done better? Because
who would be the 70s equivalent of Hulk Hogan?
I don't know. I'm just thinking like.
Well, Bruno Sammartino, if he hadn't broke his neck a few months before it.
But yeah,
like,
but what I'm thinking is like, is it a case of people going, well, I know who Muhammad Ali is, but I have no fucking idea who Antonio Inoki is?
Yeah, that was definitely part of it too. One of the things, the drawing parts of Inoki was the fact that he was from the East and from like Japan. So there was that whole, he's a proper like kung fu martial artist, and they were hoping that would draw people in a bit. Yeah,
right.
I can see that look on your face.
Yeah. He's a kung fu martial artist.
Yeah, that's how people saw him, and actually he's more to do with like he's more trained by like American catch
He's a
wrestlers.
real life Hong Kong Fooey.
Oh, come on.
We're getting to levels here. But yeah, that probably was
It's a
part
top quality
of it too.
cartoon. I enjoyed it.
I know that like a lot of companies did things where the fight would screen, but before that they would actually have wrestling cards. Like the WWF had a card which was headlined by Andre the Giant at Shea Stadium. I think AWA did one in San Francisco. They did co-promote it with pro wrestling as well, which probably hurt the boxing draw more than anything.
Well, as you mentioned before, you mentioned Inoki Genome Federation. Obviously, before that, Inoki was heavily involved in New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah.
He would tend to promote, as we mentioned, worked strong style MMA looking bouts, which in fact he is obviously known as something of a pioneer of strong style.
Yeah.
We talk about the likes of Shinsuke Nakamura calling himself the king of strong style, but Antonio Inoki is the guy who actually developed the strong style.
Yeah, well, Nakamura got the king of strong style thing because he was probably the last trainee of Inoki for New Japan. So that's where he got that title from when he came in with Chaos.
Exactly. And because of this, I wanted to move on to some of the bouts that you've watched specifically, Dan, especially involving Sakuraba, because I know Sakuraba is one of these sort of pro wrestling crossed with an MMA fighter that was very popular in Japan, certainly, and probably still is to an extent.
Yeah, the Gracie Hunter.
Yeah.
Like famously has defeated several of the Gracie family. Well, the guys I looked at a lot of Sakuraba, and I also looked at Josh Barnett because they're not only like well-versed MMA fighters with a lot of history. Josh Barnett's a former UFC heavyweight champion, but also they both quite proudly say their style is pro wrestling. Like they keep up this Japanese Inoki style of pro wrestling as a martial art.
I thought Josh Barnett says his style is catch wrestling. Like,
yeah, he does. There was a thing in Strikeforce for a while where he was saying pro wrestling because you know they do the open workouts.
I saw this. Yeah.
Yeah, he did an open workout where he actually had a wrestling match in the gym with one of his trainees, and actually did the Dusty Rhodes Hard Time promo at the end of it as part of his open workout. It was a thing of beauty. Like, Josh Barnett is so good for this type of thing.
Because wasn't Sakuraba trained by Billy Robinson?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's another Billy Robinson trainee.
Yeah, big catch wrestler, isn't he?
Yeah, well, Josh Barnett trained with Billy Robinson as well. They're both from that style. Yeah. I watched Inoki's final match, which was against Don Fry, who's another former UFC guy.
Don Fry.
And
he's going to the UFC Hall of Fame this weekend, I think.
Yeah, I'm so glad for him. I fucking love Don Fry. He's a proper old school tough guy.
He's got a cracking moustache.
Well, this fight, it kind of like epitomizes Inoki's style about the worked martial arts fight, because it was just Don Fry. It was a 5-minute match for Inoki's final ever pro wrestling match, and it was an MMA fight. Like they completely did it like a 5-minute MMA fight, like one round where Inoki finally like gets the submission at the end, and it was so good for like a little 5-minute thing. I went on from there and watched a lot of Josh Barnett and Sakuraba's matches. Josh Barnett definitely works that style. He throws in some suplexes and some actual wrestling stuff in his matches. He had a brief run in New Japan and more recently in Inoki Genome and Dream. Sakuraba's the main one, though. He still wrestles to this day for New Japan when he's not having MMA fights in between. He recently fought for Rising, which is the company Fedor came back for. One of the matches I think did we all watch Sakuraba versus Nakamura?
No.
I know. I was obviously researched into a lot of what Nakamura did. Now, Nakamura, to my understanding, was actually for a long time. It's really weird to consider this now, considering how massive a star he is. He was very unpopular in Japanese wrestling for having left and gone to do MMA and losing several proper mixed martial art fights. And I think we will talk about. I'd like to focus mostly in this particular part on the sort of MMA fighter turned wrestler, if you like, which is why we'll sort of be going to discuss what we're going to discuss in a couple of minutes. But it will be interesting as well. I think I'd like to revisit this. As I mentioned, I'd like to make it a couple of part series and visit the wrestlers turned MMA fighters. Because obviously, you know, we've got Brock this weekend returning to MMA, and we've got other people fighting in the UFC.
Other people saying they're going to have a fight, but they need emergency back surgery because they need to get that yellow streak removed.
So excellent. So I want to focus. I'd be more inclined to revisit this Sakuraba and Nakamura match on that show, but nonetheless, I would like to hear what your thoughts on the Sakuraba and Nakamura match.
They actually had a match at Wrestle Kingdom 7, I think it was, where they had a pro wrestling match. It lasts about a 12-minute match, which is quite short for a big style match like that. But again, it was this worked MMA style that they managed to do, and it's a really entertaining match for going backwards and forwards. I think the more interesting style of this match they did was Nakamura versus Daniel Gracie a few months later.
Yeah, so this is very interesting because obviously the Gracies are so famous within MMA, and this is literally one of the Gracies coming into a professional wrestling company and having a professional wrestling match.
Yeah. Well, it was him and Rolls who came in, and they actually went undefeated until the Nakamura match.
Right,
like,
so
they kept
just
having
out of interest, these Gracies, are they like good Gracies or?
Rolls is okay. Daniel Gracie is a cousin. He's not actually part of the bloodline.
Oh right, so is he like a Rock? Like,
he's
is he one of these?
No.
Married into
You know
the
who
Gracie
he is?
family.
You know who he is? He's Teddy Hart. That's who he is.
Yeah, he's
the Teddy Hart of the Gracie family.
He has had some good fights and everything. But they did this whole thing where they came in, made an open challenge. Sakuraba was always the guy who answered it because he's the Gracie hunter. Like, he's the guy who took them out in MMA. And they actually worked the MMA stuff into it because eventually you get to Daniel versus Nakamura. They actually had an MMA fight 10 years previous to this where it was a very good backwards and forwards jiu-jitsu battle pretty much because Nakamura is a black belt as well. And it ended up where Nakamura got submitted. And Daniel said, well, the rule is if anyone beats you, they get a title shot, right? I want my title shot. So they end up having a match, and it's a fucking good pro wrestling match. Mm-hmm. It's one of the first times in these style matches that I watched where it was more like the later Josh Barnett stuff I watched, where there was a lot of the MMA style, like they don't lock up at the beginning, they instantly like go into position and they're trying to get little leg kicks and trying to size each other up. But then later in the match, you start to see more of Nakamura's like, actual moveset comes along, and how he changes how he works a little bit in these as well. Where he does the thing in the corner where he puts his foot against them and shakes. Mm-hmm. When he's against the Gracies, he doesn't just do that because he just grab his foot. He actually gets their gi and like puts it over their head and actually forces them into a position where they can't get out of it. So he's actually taunting them in a legitimate way. So like wrapping all this section up as well, it's the whole thing about like Japanese, they definitely do like they like doing these worked MMA fights, but you've got a lot of people who bought into the Inoki martial art pro wrestling and actually work that style really well, and it helps that the fans also buy into it so they can do this type of thing and bring MMA fighters in.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Now, talking of the Gracies, obviously Hoist Gracie is probably the most famous in Hoist Gracie is probably the most famous of the Gracies in North America. I think we can probably agree that, can't we?
Yes.
And in terms of his most famous foe in North America, you would probably have to say it's Ken Shamrock, who is arguably the most famous MMA fighter to pro wrestler ever. Well, at least in the modern UFC era, anyway. Yeah. So I wanted to take a sort of a closer look, if you will, at Ken Shamrock's career as someone who has crossover appeal in the sense that he started in the UFC, came across to the WWF at the time of the height of the WWF's popularity, and then moved back from that to UFC just as that was beginning to gain its most mainstream popularity. So it really intrigues me because Ken was brought in originally as the ref at the famous WrestleMania 13 match.
Yeah.
Obviously Bret Hart against Steve Austin, and he gained a certain legitimacy in that match to the World Wrestling Federation audience. But obviously then he became a superstar in his own right, and quite a popular one, I would say. I mean, he won the Intercontinental Championship, which we will talk about. But, there were points at which he was a world title challenger. Now, in terms of what Ken did, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on these things, Daryl, considering your well, in terms of the people here, I think you've probably had a more invested knowledge of Shamrock's career at the time in the Attitude Era.
Yeah, so I was watching at the time, but to put it into perspective, when he debuted at WrestleMania 13, I was 6. I had no clue who he was, what he was doing there. They called him the world's most dangerous man, and I actually have a memory of looking at my dad and saying, "But he's not the champ. Like, how is he? He's not the most dangerous man. Like, Sid's got the belt. Like,
Sid's got the belt, yeah.
Psycho Sid is like the champ at this point. So like what? So like as somebody that's a child watching it, I didn't really appreciate it or appreciate him or where he'd come from. Didn't know where he'd come from. Didn't know what the UFC was. So my dad bought me like the original UFC game for the PS1, which didn't have Ken Shamrock on it. But the only guy I knew, Frank Shamrock, so he was Ken Shamrock.
Yeah, of course he was.
And I lost every fight.
It was not a good game.
No.
Also made by Acclaim, by the way.
I think so.
It might
I never played the original UFC game.
I'm not 100% certain. I'd need to check it up, and I will whilst you're talking, but I think that might have been based off of the WWF
Possibly.
Warzone, engine.
Yeah.
Go on.
So, as you were saying, Ken Shamrock debuted in the WWE, or at least, I don't know if he was there before then, but his first sort of match was he was the referee for the WrestleMania 30 match, which was March 23rd, 97. I've watched something that's on the network from an episode of Raw on the 7th of April, 97, and it was just labelled up as No Holds Barred Exhibition. And it's Shamrock versus somebody called Vernon White, who I've not seen before. I don't know if he is an actual fighter.
I think he's had a few UFC fights. That name rings a bell.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Vince McMahon's on commentary with, I think he's on commentary with Jim Ross and Honky Tonk Man. And Vince McMahon says Vernon fought all over the world in Brazil and Japan. Don't know whether, like I said, I don't know whether he's a legit fighter or just a jobber, because he does job out. They promoted the UFC pay-per-view that was on the 30th of May. Vince McMahon talks about how Ken Shamrock was from the world of no holds barred fighting, as it was called then, not mixed martial art. And he says that there's a UFC pay-per-view on the 30th of May, which features Victor Belfort and Tank Abbott. I've since looked at the card for UFC, which that pay-per-view was UFC 13, The Ultimate Force. It features 2 fights of Tito Ortiz. So Guy Mezger, aka Gay Mezger, as Tito Ortiz called him, choked out Tito Ortiz. And then later on in the card, there was a lightweight alternate match, and Tito Ortiz defeated Wes Albrighton or Albritton by TKO corner stoppage. Vitor, not Victor Belfort, defeated Tank Abbott by TKO. And then one of the matches that I wish I'd have watched, but I just didn't get the chance, was Randy Couture, and he defeated by a rear naked choke Tony Haim, aka Ludwig Borger.
No way.
Yeah, Ludwig Borger was on that card.
Well, I'll tell you what. When we do our flip side special,
Definitely.
Yep, put
That's
it
what
in,
I'm
because
doing.
that's another guy that we would know as a wrestler going into MMA. So
Yep.
there you are, ladies and gentlemen, especially our fanatics in Finland. Don't worry, Ludwig is coming. Not in that way.
So the no holds barred exhibition ends via tap out due to punches. So Ken Shamrock mounts him and just starts laying into him, and Vernon White taps out. And somewhere in the bout, he just starts pissing blood from the back of his head. Like, it's proper bad. But like, it's a worked match. You can tell it's worked. But I don't know if he just catches him or if he does a blade job. If he does a blade job, I didn't see it because I rewound it a few times to watch it. Yeah, so he's pissing blood. Jim Ross starts to interview Shamrock, and Big Van Vader comes down.
Ooh.
It's in Vader's penis, guys.
Oh, there we go.
Penis cast.
I really thought we were going to go a week without talking about Vader's penis. Now, Dan, you watched Vader against Shamrock, didn't you?
Yeah.
This is... Which show?
It was on Raw? Or was it on the pay-per-view? I don't even remember because I got it for YouTube because
I think it might have been on one of the In Your House shows. I'm not certain, but I feel like it was.
But like, the big thing people will remember from this match is Vader can be very clearly hearing saying, loosen up, calm down, because Shamrock's beating the fuck out of him. Because it's during the time where Shamrock's he's still pulling the trigger on his punches. He's not learned to not hit as hard. So Vader eventually gets him to loosen up by knocking him out. He hits him with just the stiffest forearm, and Shamrock just goes down, and Vader has to pick him up and wake him up a bit so they can finish off the match. But like, Vader couldn't walk by the end of the match as well because Shamrock keeps leg kicking him as well, and it's just, but he's like full force leg kicking him, and it's just,
you know that Vince McMahon put him up to that, don't you?
Definitely.
Because Vince McMahon's a mental case, and at this point as well, just from the commentary on that No Holds Barred exhibition, Vince McMahon's got a bit of an hard-on for this. Yeah,
well, the thing with Vader as well, Vader always had that reputation of being a tough guy and being really stiff in the ring and everything. We all know the Stan Hansen fight where him and Stan got into it and Stan Hansen knocked his eye out and he has to pop his eye back in the ring. But yeah, well, Vince always had a hard-on for his little projects because like a year before this was Mark Henry. Yeah. He always loves these things about bringing people in for sports and having them as legitimate people. And I think Ken Shamrock might have been the first one. Like, I know Mark Henry's still around and he's done really well since, but Ken Shamrock was the first one who was actually successful from the beginning.
Yeah, because Mark Henry did go through a sexual chocolate phase.
That was great.
Ken Shamrock was definitely successful in that manner because the WWF actually moved on to putting on their own version, if you like, of sort of MMA fights, if you like, which they would call the Lion's Den. I mean, in the first match at SummerSlam 1998, which is the Highway to Hell show, they didn't actually have a name for it yet. It's since been referred to as the Lion's Den, but you can hear JR say on commentary, this cage, this structure, he sort of refers to it in different ways. And even though it's clearly not the same thing as you would find in the UFC, it's certainly very similar, and it's very different to anything else you'd seen in the World Wrestling Federation at the time. So this is, as I say, Ken Shamrock against Owen Hart with the extra dimension, if you like, being that Dan the Beast Severn at this point, or Severin. Now, am I right? They say Severin.
I say Seven.
I would say Seven because that's
Seven.
how it's spelled, but they all say Severin. But anyway, he was brought in as well to act as if he was a trainer for Owen Hart, training Owen Hart to do what's essentially a Dragon Sleeper.
Yeah, well, I think if memory serves me right, the month before this, they did Shamrock versus Owen Hart in a dungeon match. Yes. And they went to the dungeon. And was Dan Severn the referee in that? Or am I making that up?
He may have been involved somehow. I'm not sure.
I don't know if I might be making it up, but I thought he was the referee in that and he cost Shamrock the match.
That was in the Lion's Den match, wasn't it?
No.
I've got my things muddled up.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's no referee in the lines. The referee circles the top of the cage. I might be making that up, but Seven gets involved in some match with them two, where you think at the start of it he's going to be on Shamrock's side, but then he...
You're probably right then. I think.
See, I think I've got my matches confused because I watched one where at the end that's how it finishes. Like, he chokes him out with the Dragon Sleeper at the end.
Right. Okay, well...
But it wasn't the dungeon match, that one either.
Well, to talk of the Lion's Den anyway, the Lion's Den, as I say, was a very unique match, especially the first one, because it was held in the theatre above Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So not in a purpose-built, but it's a completely separate area to the rest of the pay-per-view. And this was the first time they'd seen it. As I say, they weren't quite referring to it as the Lion's Den match at this point. They were just referring to it as, I think, they were putting it in the pit, as Dan said. So the match itself is very short, but it feels a lot more like that MMA style than a professional wrestling match, even though there's elements of it. And you can really tell that Owen Hart is a trained wrestler rather than a trained fighter because he's like continuously sort of throwing Shamrock for Irish whips and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
I noticed that. Yeah,
And I guess that shows you how much a wrestler sort of relies on those ropes to be there.
but we might be making the same point now because you were spot one. Did you notice Shamrock was springboarding off the cage quite a bit?
I didn't notice that much.
Showtime.
The first thing I did notice was that Shamrock starts the match with a takedown in a proper sort of like pseudo MMA style. So instead of, as you mentioned before, Dan, about the Gracie against Nakamura match, in a similar way here, he starts the match as if it is a fight. He takes Owen down rather than sort of locking up and, going into the motions with it. And that I thought was really interesting, especially considering that obviously it's a completely different environment. My only question about it was Owen Hart the right person for this type of match? And I guess the question about that could be asked of any wrestler that's not had any sort of MMA training. And it's very easy to say in retrospect when you consider that this match is like 18 years old now.
Yeah.
But Owen sort of trying to do the Irish whips and stuff makes it look really dumb sometimes.
I think it might have been because Owen at least had the kind of legitimacy of being trained in a dungeon, because Stu Hart was very much like Billy Robinson, training him in like catch wrestling and then putting him in the ring to actually learn how to work. That's how he trained Brett and the other brothers. But Owen was always more of a pro wrestler anyway. He was never really into that whole, like, he does have submissions and stuff, but he wasn't really like Brett in that sense, or like the other Harts. He was more of like a flashy pro wrestler, more high flying stuff.
I think it all depends what the feud was, and I can't remember off the top of my head how the feud started. So like, putting him in that match isn't to go, look, this is going to be a good worked MMA match. Putting him in that match is to go, right, I've gone to your domain, I've gone to the dungeon, and you fucked me over. He gets hit with a concrete slab or something. I remember, I don't know who does it. I don't think it might have even been Owen. He gets hit with a bit of concrete, which obviously isn't.
Yeah. But nonetheless, it's supposed to be.
So he fucks him over. So he's gone, right, now you're going to come into the Lion's Den, and you can't fuck me, or whatever he calls it.
You're telling me that WWE did gimmick matches that weren't just part of a pay-per-view? I thought it was because it's SummerSlam they had to do a gimmick match. Well,
next month it is the all Lion's Den event, so every match is in the Lion's Den.
Yeah, it's just...
No, Daryl, that's UFC 200, mate.
Is it? Oh, I'm getting them confused.
I'm just really surprised because feuds that build to a gimmick match. Whoa.
All right.
I know.
Mind blown.
This was in 1998. You used to like wrestling in 1998.
I did.
Exactly. So it would be nice.
Yeah, so I don't think it matters that Owen Hart was doing stuff like Irish whips because he is a pro wrestler. So his natural instinct would be, right, I've got out this move, I'll throw him into the ropes. Oh, fuck, there's no ropes, but there's chain link fence, which we have learned from cage matches that chain hurts. That's what we've been programmed to believe. So if he did throw him into that, yeah, Shamrock had quite a lot of counters to it. He'd springboard off it and like give him a back elbow or a drop kick or something like that.
Well, I want to get into that because the finish is really good because they've established here that sort of Seven's teaching Owen Hart the Dragon Sleeper. I don't think they call it the Dragon Sleeper, but that's sort of, I think they refer to it as a chokehold.
Yeah.
So Owen actually locks that on Ken, and because it's such a small and closed environment and Owen doesn't have the sort of savvy of the environment that Ken does, Ken flips off the rope behind Owen and turns it into the ankle lock for the win, which is a really great finish to what's... It's a short match, but it's a really good short match because the psychology is different. And I really enjoyed seeing this, considering I'd never seen a Lion's Den match before.
Yeah, it's a similar finish to the Brett Roddy Piper WrestleMania 8 match. Piper's got him in a sleeper, and Brett walks up the turnbuckle, and then counters it into a pin. So obviously he walks up to the cage and flips back. And I thought it was an interesting finish and a good way to show that he's an expert in there and he knows his way around the cage.
Yeah. I watched another match which actually took place before this. Now we're going to go on and talk about another cage match, a proper classic blue bar cage match, which is Shamrock against Mankind against The Rock from Breakdown. But I also watched Ken Shamrock, which might be his only shot at the title on pay-per-view. I may be wrong there.
Probably, especially after the match.
Certainly there's only one-on-one shot at the title on pay-per-view, if it is, which is In Your House 1997 D-Generation X, and that's WWF champion Shawn Michaels against Ken Shamrock. Now, this is the month after the Montreal Screwjob, and I believe at this point Owen Hart hasn't been seen in ages, and that plays into the finish. But in the meantime, this match is for me, it tells a difference between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart at the time. Like,
I mean, this is full-on drug addict Shawn Michaels, by the way. This is pill-popping Shawn Michaels. This is Shawn Michaels at his best.
Just before he actually needed the pills because of his back injury.
Well, funny enough, I literally wrote down during the height of Shawn being a massive bell end. I thought that was pretty appropriate because Shamrock and Bret Hart had a match on Raw, I think a few months before this, maybe a few weeks before this, and Bret really made Ken Shamrock look really good and worked really hard to make him look like a star. And Shawn really tried very hard to make Ken look like an idiot.
Well, Bret wanted to drop the belt to Shamrock. Do you know about this?
Well, he wanted to drop the belt to someone.
Yeah, he wanted to drop the belt, but he
suggested
Shamrock, which I don't think helped his cause when coming up onto this match, to be honest.
There's one point where HBK just skins the cat for no reason.
Why not?
He goes over the rope and he's just stood there. He's got no reason to.
Because he's the show-off.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Let's get him started on that again.
Stopper. God. Oh, by the way, completely unrelated to this. Did you see on Raw that Dolph Ziggler's now taking to say, well, I lost again? Literally, he's saying it now.
He rang his mum. That was his mum on the phone. He rang his mum and said, oh, no, mum, I lost again. Your mum wasn't even watching. You had to ring her. And she goes, oh, did you win? No. I'm a disappointment.
Anyway, the daft thing about this is the in-your-house match actually ends in a DQ when D-Generation X run in as Shawn's in the ankle lock. And then Owen attacks Shawn after the match, which is actually pretty exciting because obviously at the time this was just post-Montreal. Owen hadn't been seen since Montreal and it was a big deal. But as a result of that, Shamrock gets sort of lost in the fray, which is a bit of a shame, but he is also calling spots really loudly during this match.
Yeah, but about Shawn being at the height of his time as a bell end, I'm pretty sure Shawn Michaels has admitted to this since then, that he said to Ken Shamrock, oh, call the spots really loud because I'm not going to be able to hear you out there.
Yep.
Just to fuck him over. Just so he could run back to Vince and go, did you fucking hear that guy?
Classic HBK.
What a cock.
That's why I like him.
Shall we move on to the other lines, Dan, or do you want to talk about the cage match?
We'll talk about the cage match if you want.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So this is quite like a really good cage match, a really good triple threat for what is essentially what you would consider now as a B pay-per-view. Another In Your House, which is Breakdown. This is 1998, and the winner of the match gets a title shot on Raw. Now, this is during the whole Undertaker, Kane, Steve Austin thing.
Okay.
Where I believe this is the same show where Undertaker and Kane both pin Austin at the same time. So neither of them wins the title. And because of that, it's a little bit odd that they're actually having a triple threat match to determine a number one contender, considering they're having a triple threat match in the main event to determine the champion.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's the classic blue bar with steel rigging. And one thing I really wanted to bring up in this is JR talks about Ken Shamrock not knowing his real father. So it's in this era where they're doing this almost hyper reality. They're bringing real elements of people's personalities into their wrestling characters. And it's stuff like that that helped people engage in the Attitude Era. And I don't think it always works, but looking at Mick Foley, his character started to become more successful when they incorporated elements of Mick Foley into who Mankind was. And then you talk about JR just saying stuff about Ken Shamrock, like he didn't know his dad and he's been fighting since he was whatever age. And it's things that let you relate to people that I think they miss a little bit.
Yeah, the as far as Mick Foley goes, I can't remember which match I watched because I watched so many, but I saw a segment before one of the matches, and it's a backstage promo with Mankind, and he's talking about how he didn't want to wrestle in one of the matches because his tag team partner weren't there. I can't remember who his partner was at the time.
Kane, I think.
Maybe he's got the tag belt with him, so it might have been Kane.
Yeah. And
Vince McMahon walks up to him and says, "What do you mean? You're Mankind. Do you not remember when you hitchhiked to Madison Square Garden?
Yeah.
And you watched Jimmy Snooker fly off the cage?" And it's like that story, like sort of has become synonymous with Mick Foley and Mankind, and that's part of it's part of Mick Foley's life, but it's also part of Mankind's character now.
Well, it is this match.
Sorry.
it is this match that relates to, because there's a spot in this match that actually calls back to that. But we'll get to that in a minute. Sorry, Dan, you were going to say.
I was just going to make a really bad joke. I was just going to say Vince didn't go up to him and say, "Oh, Sable's wrestling. She's your friend, isn't she? You're friends with her, aren't you?"
This is before that. This is before he was mates with everybody. You know, Tori's just a really nice girl. It's a really nice person.
Deborah's somewhere around. You're friends with her, aren't you?
Deborah's a really nice person. All of them are really nice people. I like them all.
I'm a fan of Noelle Foley. She's a really nice person.
The other thing to note about this match is that even though The Rock is the heel, the crowd is massively pro Rock. Like, they love him.
Yeah.
You can really tell. I think this is not long before the whole Deadly Game thing. And you can tell, and Foley's mentioned it in his book as well, that they're begging to make him a face at this point. And in fact, to the point where I think this is the first time that the fans are actually turning on Shamrock, and they're like Shamrock socks and stuff. And this is before his heel turn and he joins the corporation. And The Rock is so popular that, in fact, at one point, he does a double people's elbow on both Mankind and Shamrock, and people go fucking ape shit. Like, he takes both of his elbow pads off, lobs them over the cage into the crowd, and the place is just going mad. So I know we're talking about Ken Shamrock, and I want to talk about him a bit more, but at the same time, it's really interesting to see that this is 1998. This is like nearly 20 years ago, and this is just when The Rock was going from that sort of, Rocky Maivia, what a knobhead, to we fucking love him.
Did you know Rocky Maivia is blue chipper?
Yes, mate, I did. Do you know why I knew that?
Why?
Because literally every time I mention Rocky Maivia, you mention that he's blue chipper.
Oh, but he is, though.
Shamrock's ankle lock, by the way, can we agree, looks a lot better than Kurt Angle's?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because he knows how to put it on legit, doesn't he?
Yeah, he probably just was busting people's ankles at the time.
And because when he screams wildly, you believe it, because he looks like a murderer.
Yep. Plus, also, Kurt Angle used to use the ankle lock like every 10 minutes, and by the end, it was like, well, no one's going to tap out the fucking spanner.
Is this the match, and I don't know if you're going to get onto it, where it's got that triple headlock, double headlock? Is it?
Might be. I don't recognise.
I'm sure there was a spot in it where one of them's got the other one in an headlock, and then the third one comes over and pops other one in an headlock. Or maybe it's a abdominal stretch.
It is an abdominal stretch. Yes,
there's
like a massive abdominal stretch. Yes,
yeah,
it is that. That's a really good spot. And then, as I mentioned before, they call back to the whole Mick Foley traveling to Madison Square Garden, which he's done before in cage matches. I think he'd done it in a different cage match to this as well. But he's wearing the Dude Love t-shirt underneath his shirt.
Okay.
And he gets to the top of the cage. All he has to do is climb out, but he takes the shirt off and he throws himself off. Fucking hell, it's brutal.
Yeah.
Because he lands from the cage roof onto his knees. Like, he's not doing a splash, he's doing an elbow. So because of that, the first thing that lands is his fucking knees. It just looks brutal. If you want to know why Mick Foley was walking with a cane for a bit, this is fucking why. And then there's a really brilliant finish. The finish to this match is really good as well. Because obviously it's pinfall, submission, or escape the cage. Foley absolutely smashes Ken with a chair, by the way.
Yeah, I want to talk about Ken Shamrock and chair shots. He never puts his hands up for chair shots. He is gonna be fucked. If he's not already fucked, he is gonna be fucked. His brain is shagged.
Well, he gets knocked out really easy nowadays as well, so that's probably why.
Yeah, but do you remember some of them chair shots he took? I'm pretty sure that The Rock laced him with a fucking chair countless times, before and after this match, just unprotected. Because quite often he'll have that ankle lock on, and somebody to get him off it will crack him with a chair. But instead of thinking, oh, we'll hit him on his back to protect him.
Back him in the face?
Yeah, just overhead.
But anyway, the point of the finish is that Mankind smacks him with a chair, Rock's already down, and Mankind fucks off, and he climbs to the other side, and whilst he's climbing out, The Rock pins Shamrock to win. Which I thought was a really good finish. I don't think we're going to have time to talk about the other Lions Den matches, unless you want to mention them briefly.
I just want to briefly mention the one that I watched with Vince McMahon, because it's the night of the higher power reveal And Shamrock, I don't know if you remember at the time, he was in the corporation.
Yes.
And he was when Undertaker had that teddy of Stephanie's. Like, Shamrock set upon himself, or maybe Vince ordered him, I don't know, but to find Stephanie. And do you guys remember him calling Undertaker by his actual real name?
No.
Yeah. So like there was
Vince or
no
Ken?
Shamrock.
Right.
So like on the air they were like, because they were going like this hyper real thing. He calls him Mark. And he's talking to him as Mark and saying, "No, Mark, you need to bring Stephanie back." Like,
wasn't the point of this angle though? Like, well, if we fucking go into the point of angle, we'll do another podcast. But wasn't there a part of this angle where Vince was like, right, he's lost his mind. He's forgot that he's Mark Calloway. He thinks he's the Undertaker.
Possibly, yeah.
Which I bet Vince fucking hates watching back now, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that because there was what actually happens is Vince delays and by holding the cage door, eventually Shamrock rags it open and then turns around and JEFF ain't I great, cracks him with a brutal fucking chair shot, absolute banger. His brain rattled. The other one was against Steve Blackman, and Steve Blackman's good. It had nunchucks in it, I got anticlimactic ending. Blackman loses via kendo stick shot to the head, laid out for a count of 10. Job done. There we go.
One very brief thing I wanted to say about Ken Shamrock as well. After he left the World Wrestling Federation, that wasn't the end of his professional wrestling career.
Was it not?
No.
Oh.
Do you want to know where he turned up?
So it's somebody that was in the WWE, left wrestling, then he went back to wrestling.
Yep.
TNA?
Yeah.
Oh, how did I guess?
Ken Shamrock was the first NWA champion for TNA. At the start of TNA 1,
Yeah.
right, the TNA 1 has the Gauntlet for the Gold match, which is a pretty clever idea. Like, it starts off as a Royal Rumble type match, or a Battle Royal, if you like. Everyone just comes down at different times until the last two are in the ring, at which point it becomes a wrestling match, and the winner is by pinfall or submission. At the start of the first TNA show, everybody comes out and says the main event idea is stupid, including Ken Shamrock and Jeff Jarrett and Scott Hall. But nonetheless, that's the match we have. Now, I only really watch this from when Ken comes in because it's fucking, not only is it TNA, it's early TNA. So,
His cheeks in this match.
No, Cheeks had already broken the ring though. By the time the opening segment was to stall until they'd fixed the ring after Cheeks broke it.
Fat fuck.
But here, as Ken enters the ring, we've got Apollo, Shinjiro Otani.
Sorry, I know we talk about this, but because we're on about TNA, who fixed the ring? Do you know this?
No, but you do.
Who's fixing TNA now? The Harris brothers. That's all I'm saying.
Well, anyway, in the ring we've got Apollo, Shinjiro Otani, Vampire Warrior, not Gangrel,
No, not
Vampire
Gangrel.
Warrior, even though it's the same person. Malice.
Who's Malice?
I don't know, but I feel like he might be dead.
For 24 years, I've been living next door to Malice.
Malice? Who the fuck is Malice? Yeah, we set each other up. Chris Harris, or Braden Walker, who's better known.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Braden Walker, I'm going to knock your brains out.
Oh, I'm afraid of you now. Scott Hall and former 1PW champion and booker Steve Corino.
I do not owe you money.
To be fair, the actual Gauntlet for the Gold, once everyone's been chucked out, it's just Ken Shamrock and Malice. The match they work is actually quite clever because Malice is a huge guy, so it's based around Malice being massive and chucking Ken around, and Ken uses submissions, so he's wearing him down and wearing him down and wearing him down. Do you think the match ends with a tap out?
No, it probably ends with a brutal chair shot.
No, he just gives him the belly to belly and pins him.
The belly to belly?
Yep. The belly to belly.
Like the Bailey to Bailey, or
Like
whatever
the belly
it's
to
called.
belly, yeah. That move and pins him. That's it.
Wonderful.
And then Ken eventually lost the belt to R-Truth. Or Ron the Truth Killings, as he was called. So we've talked about the great World Wrestling Federation / MMA fighter that was Ken Shamrock, but there was another great UFC fighter who made the transition to professional wrestling around the same time, and his name was Tank Abbott.
Yes, it was. Yeah, so I haven't actually watched any of his dancing stuff for this because I'm sure we can just riff on that because of how hilarious it was. I watched some stuff pre-dancing Tank Abbott. One particular match caught my attention, which was Tank Abbott versus Meng. From Nitro, 13th of December 1999, if anybody wants to go to the network and watch that. Stiff body shots, very stiff, not to the face. I think they must have had an agreement beforehand of let's punch the fuck out of each other, but let's not like break noses.
Rick Martel rules.
Yeah. It spills outside, they continue fighting, it ends in a double count out, and they continue to fight to the back. It's a short, simple match. No planning involved apart from just don't punch me in the face, please. Awesome. They big up Tank Abbott as being like a legit fighter and that he's fought in UFC and he's a mixed martial artist and he's a street fighter and all this. And he's a tough guy. And then they big up Meng as well. He's a tough guy and all this. And so I think they started off like to a good start. I don't know if that was his first match, but it was an early match in his WCW career anyway. Then I jumped to somebody we've spoken about before on the podcast, dedicated an episode to him, Scott Steiner.
Yes.
It was labelled as Scott Steiner versus Tank Abbott, but it was more of an angle. So that's from WCW Nitro, 22nd of May 2000, and it's an Asylum match. And I watched this because I thought it might be a bit like a Lion's Den match. However, so Scott Steiner enters with his freaks. And he says, he cuts a promo about that he doesn't like Rick Steiner for some reason. He doesn't like Tank Abbott. He wants to fight them both. In the promo, he says, all my freaks know there's nothing finer than doing the 69er with Scott Steiner.
That's a brilliant line.
That's a 2000 WCW line where he's gone, I'm fucking saying that and you're not stopping me. So the Asylum's actually a circular cage with a roof, and it lowers within the ring.
A bit like TNA Steel Asylum.
Kind of, but
not, yeah.
So it's within the ropes, so you can't get to the corners or the ropes. It's a small. It just, you know, the WCW Nitro logo.
Yep.
It just covers that basically.
Right. Okay.
So Scott calls out Rick and Tank Abbott. Rick Steiner comes down, and they have a bit of a fight. Enter Tankberg. They've already started fucking him over because he's ripping off somebody in their own company. Like, they do the knock on the door and he comes out and he's got the pyro exactly like Goldberg and they call him Tankberg.
Fuck me.
I can't remember this happening, but I wrote down Abbott punches the fuck out of the ref. So he must have really, really fucking punched him. Like, because I would have just like, he said he threw ref out away. He must have fucking laced him. The cage raises and they double team Scott Steiner, and then Kevin Nash comes down to make the save, and then they talk about the Millionaires Club. So it's around that time. Yes, they I think they fucked over Tank Abbott.
Would you say Tank Abbott was as successful or as good as Ken Shamrock?
No. That's my summing up of his career.
Would you even say he was as successful as Dan the Beast 7?
In what respect? Because like Dan the Beast 7's boring as fuck.
And Dan the Beast had his own wrestling promotion. Because I actually had a DVD of theirs somewhere where the main event is him versus Jimmy Jacobs.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah.
What the fuck is
Fucking
this?
hell.
Dan the Beast is a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
He is, much like Ken Shamrock.
Dan the Beast 7 was in the NWA revival in 1997 in WWF.
There you go.
Just saying.
That's all you need to know. Well, I really enjoyed that, but we will have a second part of this around, as I say, around the time of UFC 203.
Well, let's say it's around the time of CM Punk's UFC fight.
Okay.
Because if he delays it, it won't be around 203, will it?
Yeah, you're right.
I really want to do the second part to this, but I've got the feeling it'll never happen if we wait.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that we'll do it before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Lovely. So if CM Punk delays his fight, or he just decides, you know, I'm not gonna fight, we will do it. But
we'll spend the entire episode.
Mickey Gall, if your plans get changed, you can come here and talk about it with us.
Yeah, actually, they are. I know we don't do interviews, or at least we haven't done interviews, but I'll openly. If Mickey Gall somehow hears this, and he has liked us on Facebook, on Twitter,
yeah.
Then Mickey, feel free to come on and talk about how much we're
Hey Mickey, you're so fine. You're so fine. You blow my mind. Hey Mickey,
you'll punch Punk's mind out of his mind,
out of his spine. Which doesn't kind of work.
On that bombshell, royalgrumble.podbean.com. You can find us on there, or you can find us at royalgrumble.weebly.com. Make sure to like us on Facebook. We are on facebook.com/royalgrumble, or on Twitter. We are on twitter.com/royalgrumblepod, or you can email us at royalgrumblepod@gmail.com. Is that everything, or have I missed anything out?
Quick predictions for Brock Lesnar fight, since we're doing this because of Brock Lesnar.
I can't not say Brock wins. I know Mark Hunt is going to win, but Brock wins.
I really want Brock to win. I really don't know what'll happen, but I really want Brock to win. That's all I want.
It's really hard to tell, but I feel like it's going to be Mark Hunt, and it might be a walk-off as well.
But do you not want Brock to win? Bearing in mind, it'll be good for WWE, it'll be good for storylines.
It'll be good for WWE and storylines, but
and your friends
I love Mark Hunt.
Do you love Mark Hunt more than me and Graeme?
Not really. I don't know him as well as you.
So you love me and Graeme more than Mark Hunt?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yay!
Big gay.
Bye.
Big gay, so...
Say goodbye, Daryl.
Goodbye, Daryl.
Say goodbye, Dan.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.